Laurence Frank Wilmot, born April 27th, 1907, in Clanwilliam, Manitoba. When the war broke out, turned on the radio, and there was the announcement. England and France were now at war with Germany. And so at this date, on morning of September the 3rd, as it was there, they were at war. And inevitably it was going to be a long war, and that I felt I must be there with them if I could do. This was 1940. I carried on my work for another year. Other young men were being pulled in as chaplains. Nothing was happening to me. In spring of 1943, finally I was appointed to a chaplain to No. 2 Canadian Hospital, which was forming up in the fall of 43. And I went over on the Queen Elizabeth with 25,000 others. In a 3 days' time, we were in Gourock. That fast it was. We went up to Gourock and joined a convoy of 50 ships. And they sailed due west for 5 days, imagine. And then there was lots of flashing and shots and depth charges and everything going on off to the forward, about a mile or so ahead. And the corvettes just went like a pack of hounds through the convoy, off in the direction of the lights and flashings. And each ship in the convoy turned around, and we were going back. In 20 minutes, we were going back the other way. And then we turned south, and we passed the west of the Azores and south, and then across to North Africa, and came up the African coast to the bay at Gibraltar. By this time, I was with an allotment of about 40 reinforcement tank officers, Armoured Corps. And so one of the things they did at Blackdown was they took all my infantry regiment outfit away from me and gave me a tank outfit, including a tank helmet. And I became, on this long voyage, every day we had boat drill and full kit, and I became accustomed, and I liked it much better than the infantry helmet because it's much closer to your head, fitted so nice and neatly, and I felt much safer in it. By the time they got to the Hitler Line battle, I realized that I'd been really becoming too actively involved because I had so many close shaves. For example, just a day or so before we got to the Hitler Line, suddenly one morning a word came through that Major Russell had his headquarters taken a direct hit on the slit trench. Here were these 3 men dead, and the men get quite edgy if there are dead men there. They've got to be dealt with. And so I laid on a burial party and started digging, but then we got a hail of mortars, and we had to let off that, and we simply tidied up some slit trenches and buried them in slit trenches. And actually, my digging party and I had to climb into a slit trench on 1 or 2 occasions while we were getting them ready to avoid being hit by mortars, and finally got them buried. I cut down some trees and made 3 rough wooden crosses to be planted at these men's graves with their names on and everything else, and sent them off with the young men who were going up to the line. They were going back to the company anyway, and they knew where to put them. They were going to bury them, put them there. And apparently, I didn't know this, but apparently one of the tank officers coming down the road met these 3 men going up the line, going, and he said, "What are you fellows doing?" "Oh," he said, "we're going back to our company," but he said, "This is our Padre's idea of efficiency. If we carry our cross with us, then they don't have any problem identifying us when they bury us." We had to carry back about a half a mile, I guess, and we were moving along about 50 yards to the right-hand side of the main road that was being shelled by the enemy, because normally it'd be filled with traffic. So finally, a shell drops, and I said, "All right, we cross through." But on this occasion, for some reason, they sent another shell right after the other. And this shell, I knew it was coming right at us. I mean, I felt I was hearing the music of the spheres. It landed about here, and I felt I'd been hit on the head with a sledgehammer. And I'm struggling to bring myself, you know, it knocked me down to my knees almost, struggling to bring myself to my feet, trying to find out where the blood was spurting out here, and I wondered what the hole was. And then I said, you fool, if there's a hole that big, you wouldn't be standing up. I said, let's get out of here before they send another. So we did. We got back to the RAP, and blood on my face and blood on my shoulder. And once he mopped the blood up and cleaned me up, all I needed was a Band-Aid on the top of this ear. But the blood, you see, on the pressure I was under, the blood just spurted out. We lost so many men. And I must have been fired on, I don't know how many times, wearing the armbands, one on each arm. But they shot them down. I had to bury too many of our stretcher bearers because the Red Cross armband was insufficient. It was all right in 1850 or 60, but it's not now, and it wasn't being respected. The trouble was, the enemy pulled back to the main Gothic line defences on the 29th of August, and then on the 30th of August, there was dead silence, nothing going on. No shelling, no movement, no evidence of movement. Anyway, so this company was sent in to carry out a reconnaissance to find out the strength of the enemy. And his report clearly indicated they're there in strength and ready to battle. Well, the colonel was having nothing to do with it. So I went back, found my way back to the RAP, and by the time I got back, I knew what I must do. And I told the corporal, I said, I'm going in with them. Around 4:30 or 5, we were awakened and got up and started our way up to this great anti-tank ditch, about halfway across the river valley. Well, then the two companies lined up in the ditch. Then the machine guns opened up from both flanks, and mortars and shells. And all hell broke loose. And there were cries from every element of the front. Cries for help, for the Padre, for the stretcher bearers, and help. And just a dreadful situation, impossible situation. And I felt futile, totally futile. Here am I, one person. What can I do? So I turned and I said, are we all here? Stretcher bearers and the carrying party shouted as one man, we're here, ready to go. I said, all right. We'll go single file, make a smaller target. Let's go. On we went, came to the thing, and there was desolation, men lying in every direction. And some dead, some wounded, and some in agony of pain. And the stretcher bearers went to work, and I went to work myself, and I guess it was after 1:30 by the time we got them all out. And it was absolutely an incredible day. I never dreamed we'd live through it. You know, I really couldn't believe myself when it was through. And so we got back. When we got down to the river, the jeep picked us up and brought us back to the RAP, and the doc gave me a pill to give me a chance to get some rest. I couldn't get to sleep. I just lay there thinking of the whole thing. It was absolutely a terrific day. It had a terrific effect on me. I felt I was through with the whole thing. I know so many, these men, wonderful fellows, and to see them wasted, that's the thing. After this, both CO and the brigadier met with me and individually and talked to me and said, now, would you please stay at the regimental aid post, because if anything happened to you, there's nobody to take your place, and it would take us weeks to get somebody else in. So please, so I agreed that I would stay there. Well, then the CO called me up to have laid on a grave burial party. So I came up with and he laid on a team of men, and I went back to. I got a ride with the quartermaster. He was up picking up equipment, because he had rescue equipment from the battlefield. We got, I would say, about 300 yards from the place, and a shell struck a building behind us. Well, either it was a part of the shrapnel or a spent shell that hadn't hit the building, came sizzling past us, and went making a fluttering noise, went past my ear, my right ear, and left me a ringing in my ear. My face was hot from it, and past the back of the neck of the driver of the Jeep, and his left ear was ringing. It passed that close, right between us, 45 miles an hour. You know, if you planned that with a computer even, it'd be difficult. It would have taken, if it had hit either one of us, we'd have lost our heads. Just taking your head off. I felt destroyed after the Gothic line. That Fogley River situation. It seemed so futile, totally futile. And I had no stomach for the war at all. I was ready to quit, but I wouldn't quit, and I wouldn't ask to be relieved. And I suppose that he probably even didn't know what we'd gone through, you know. But we should have been pulled out. However, nobody pulled us out, and they couldn't pull the men out. They had to go on and fight. War is a ghastly, ghastly situation. It is really organized chaos. And each group of men is seeking to destroy and eliminate the other. And nothing ever works out as planned. And the whole situation is chaos. And how I survived, by the grace of God, that's all I can say. I was able to do things after the war that I'd never been able to do before, because I'd gone through that. Well, I would certainly like them to know that their fathers and their grandfathers went to a war which wasn't just a lark. It had to be fought. It's been a different world ever since, and we owe it to those men and women who died in that war to make it possible for what we have today. For Canada to be the tremendous country it is today. Absolutely tremendous. And of course it is a tremendous experience to me to be alive, to see all this happening. And I've never forgot him.